Oh, I really like that song. Sometimes, it's hard to get excited in the Sunday afternoon after you go home and you eat, and then I'm already kind of fried from teaching and preaching this morning, and get my nap on and wake up and try to get rejuvenated. And then that was such a wonderful song. Thank you so much, Lorenzo, for that. That was all of you. I mean, what a friend we have, in Jesus, isn't it? And so we're continuing in this great book of Isaiah. Believe it or not, we're like almost done through it. I think this is the most thorough I've really gone through Isaiah and taught this. And I don't know, I've just really enjoyed it because of my own personal study and preparing. But what I want to do is let's take a look at how it fits in. And I'm going to also have a little bit of a discussion before we get into chapter 60, because I think it's kind of important to understand another concept about the greater picture about mankind's relationship with God and the things that happened all the way back the Tower of Babel. So as we look at the way that Isaiah is going to fit in, we go back to chapters 52, 53, and we see the servant suffers and he brings salvation. And then in 54, we see because of that salvation, Zion is restored and it's also enlarged. And in 55, God invites all who thirst to receive this covenant blessings. Now, if you look at this, they're all flowing. This is such a gospel story for the Messianic period when Christ comes. It also is very encouraging for those who are listening to this when they initially read it, not really appreciating it. And then what they call a second temple period is when they came back and rebuilt after captivity. It was something that they were looking forward to, that this new building and blessings that were going to come upon them. But as we read 60, we'll see it never happened. And so it's like, what happened? What was he talking about? And so 55 invites all those who serve to receive covenant blessings. But really, looking at the new covenant that's coming up, those blessings are going to extend way beyond just Israel, which again blows my mind because how hard even the apostles struggled sometimes with comprehending that all races of people were going to be welcomed into this, foreigners and everyone. And we're going to see that again in this chapter tonight. And then 57 through 59, the problem remains is it's sin and it's a spiritual darkness. And the idea as well is that Israel cannot save itself. And this is an idea that's going to come into chapter 60 when we look at there. That turning point is in verse 20 of 59. And this is a Redeemer will come to Zion. Now this is where if you were coming out of captivity after, 100 years after Isaiah had wrote this, and you're building the temple and you're looking around and being discouraged like Ezra and Nehemiah were, you're looking forward to these blessings, this section here where Isaiah is talking about, especially 60. 60 is like a big tease. If I was living when Ezra and Nehemiah were trying to rebuild the temple after coming back from Babylon, man, this would be, I'd be looking forward to chapter 60, all the things he talks about. And it's interesting because it didn't. And that should have been the question. When Jesus came, they should have been going, what happened, right? What happened? So 60, we're going to see the result of this. The Zion rises in God's light. And he's going to be very clear that there's two lights. There's one that's in nature, and there's one that's going to be coming from God. And that the nations, again, here it is, all cultures, regardless of heritage, were going to be attracted to this light. So now let's talk about a very difficult concept sometimes for some, because when we look at this, it's not talked about or taught a lot about, and I don't know how much study you've done in it. But if you go back to Genesis, we know that God had established, in the garden that we were to be under him. He was going to be our king, and we were going to be his children. Well, we rebelled. The nation became humanity became very ungodly, and God then judged the world, and he destroyed it. And then after that, and we see that he gave another covenant. He still had this idea that all humanity would be one under him. But what did they do? Remember what they do? What's the first thing they did? They built a tower. And they built this tower, and believing that somehow this ziggurat or this tower, you'll see those, was going to be something in which they could bring themselves up to God or bring God down. And that in that, because they were united as one people, God came down and he divided them. He divided them by language. Now, when you read it in there, in the story in Genesis, it's language, but we know that that language became a culture, and he divided them. What's fascinating is in Deuteronomy 32, when Moses is getting ready to leave, his farewell, he reveals something about what was going on there. And he says in Deuteronomy 32:8, when the Most High gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed borders of the peoples according to the numbers of the sons. But the Lord's portion is his people, Jacob his allotted inheritance. Now, this is where, and this isn't just me, this is a lot of the Hebrew scholars as well. They look at this and they understand there was more than God just saying, you all got a bunch of different languages. He, in a sense, was disinheriting them. And when you go to the Psalms and you look in Psalms 82, you see this very interesting picture of an event that's going on that the psalmist is writing about this divine council. And he says, God has taken his place in the divine council. Amidst the gods, he upholds judgment. So you have God and gods. Now, let's a little bit of Hebrew here. Elohim can mean, the basic stripped down definition we have always thought of, it just means God. If you have a Greek lexicon, you click on it on your program or something, it'll just say Elohim, when the English will say God. But that Elohim is a disembodied spirit. So the translators have to be careful about what they call an Elohim or Elohims. And in this situation, you have an Elohim, singular, and then Elohims. So you have plural. So he's not saying they're like God and equality at all, but he's talking about there are these other entities that in this divine council, and then you go to Job. Remember Job. There's a divine council that right there in the opening of Job. Now, we don't have a lot of background and history about what that divine council does and such, but it does exist. And in this one, though, we see where, now first off, remember what Deuteronomy said. God had divided them up, and basically he turns them over to the principalities and disinherits them. But he did chose, now he calls him Jacob, but really it was Abraham, wasn't it? Out of all of them right after the Tower of Babel, all the mankind, humanity had been divided out, and he gave them up. He then took his chosen one. Now, why did he do that? Well, because he said, okay, you know what? You guys think you can do it on your own? Okay, here. Try to be as just and graceful and loving and righteous as me. And they didn't do it right. But he chose one out and he said, now watch this. Watch this. Abraham. And he brought Abraham and he made his own people his inheritance. Now, I know it's a lot of background, but it helps to understand then when Isaiah 60, when he starts to bring this out, and this whole section of Isaiah is really showing and really kind of waving his finger at the world and showing them, ha, see what I told you? You couldn't do it. But I did. I accomplished it. And so over in Psalms 82, we see this divine council. God has taken his place in the divine council. Amidst the gods upholds judgment. How long? Now he's judging them. How long will you judge unjustly and show partiality to the wicked? Give justice to the weak, to the fatherless. Maintain the right of the afflicted, the destitute. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked. They neither have knowledge or understanding. They walk about in what? Darkness. The foundations of the earth are shaken. I have said you are gods, the Most High, but nevertheless you shall die. You will all fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge earth. You shall inherit what? All nations. He's bringing them back, you see. And that fits with what Isaiah has been saying over and over, isn't it? Where that you start out, where God in the initial garden, all were one. And then, because of the rebellion, he divided them and said, fine, you choose. And what they choose? All of them had, this is where all your pagan gods come up. Baal, Ashtaroth, all of those, Molech, all of those became their gods. All the nations they worshiped that. And so then he judged them. But his plan was, look at my inheritance and look what this faithful one did and demonstrated to all creation what I can accomplish through this faith of Abraham and making him my people. And that's why it's important to kind of understand that this is the beauty of Isaiah kind of coming back and almost like, ha, look what I'm doing and look what I'm going to do. You have taken this world and you have corrupted it, and now it's time for all to come back and be under one. And that's why even in the New Testament, Paul and them refer to in how the inheritance of all nations were going to be the Messiahs, that reconciliation. And so it's kind of that, it's a lot deeper. I mean, you may have questions. I may be throwing a lot on you right now, but I think it helped me a lot when I was doing some deep study a while back on this. And then coming into Isaiah, man, it really helped to show the beauty of what Isaiah now is really saying. He is showing how God had once disinherited everyone, all the different people that he divided, but now he's given them a place to come back to, and that they're going to come back. But it's a spiritual, it's not just a physical. This divine counsel and all of these influences, the powers and principalities, we know those exist, right? They're there. You know, they do exist. And so the key verse here, though, is how this coming, this fulfillment, in the very first verse, this arise and shine. Two actions here. Arise and shine. And I'm going to show how amazing this really fits with something even greater. This is being on this side of the cross and knowing all the fulfillment. This is so hard not to see the complete messianic prophecy of the kingdom and everything. Because it just seems like he's speaking to us and showing us this. But this was something that they would look forward to. And so the glory of the Lord rises up. So let's read. Starting verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord has risen upon you. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth, and thick darkness the peoples. But the Lord will arise upon you, and his glory shall be seen upon you. And nations shall come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your rising. So the very first thing we see, command to Zion. Now, let's do a little bit of words here. So whenever we talk about light, we understand that that is righteousness, that's something, and there's sources of it. And the one natural source that we see, of course, is the sun. But ultimately, we know that the prophets and God has always expressed that he is light. Jesus is light, right? And Zion is reference to very physically a city, but it's also what? A place where God dwells. It's a place of God's people. And it's also Jerusalem. So the new Jerusalem. This really is going to hook into Revelations 21 when we get through here. The new heavens, the new earth. And so this command is grounded in grace. It's not in human achievement. God is the actor. He is the one that's going to do this. And then he expects Zion, his people, to respond. And this is all going to come, really, at the messianic arrival and crucifixion and resurrection and ascension. All of this is kind of foreshadowing and showing really that. This darkness is going to be answered. What is that? That darkness is hopelessness, right? It's sin. But God is going to be the actor who is going to bring forward this light, and it's going to change everything. This is a spiritual blindness. This is a judgment that is coming upon them, and God's glory is going to become public, not something that's hidden. It's very visible, and it's going to be seen in his restored people. And the nations are going to be drawn to that brightness. The light, I think, is that missionary effort of the apostles in the first century. Whenever they go out, and you see them there, and that you see that that Jesus even said, "Go out to all nations," right? Preach, make disciples of all nations. He told them, "You're going to stand before kings," right? You're going to stand before kings. Where did Paul go? Paul stood from every level of authority, from the local governor to all the way up to Nero himself. So this why I'm saying 60 is so hard not to see this amazing fulfillment in the gospel in the first century there. And he says Zion's children will return. Those scattered sons and daughters, when he talks about them, it's Zion's grief is going to be changed. So they go out of that captivity, the destruction of Babylon, but the shadow is more than just the return of those coming out of captivity. It was going to be the return from when they were all divided and spread out. The God spiritually was bringing them back together. Lift up your eyes, verse 4, all around and see. They all gather together. They come to you. Your sons shall come from afar. Your daughters shall be carried on the ship. Then you shall see and be radiant. Your heart shall thrill and exult, because the abundance of the sea shall be turned to you. The wealth of the nations shall come to you. So God is going to scatter what judgment and exile had done. And that is also what he did when he scattered all of mankind, divided them up and separated them apart. You see this way of him bringing everyone back. That is a great description, the way he shows this. This is not all about just, he's saying, look up and rejoice. Now, again, if you're the one who's come back from captivity, we know that they all didn't come back, did they? They were Cyrus freed them, a king, by the way, right? Gave them money, gave them resources to go back and to build their temple. But a bunch stayed. They didn't come home. And so how sad it would have been for you to go back excited about rebuilding the temple, getting our relationship back with God, and where are all the children? Where are they? Why won't they come back? They stayed. And so to those that are returning from the physical captivity, it would be a joyful thing. On the day of Pentecost, over 3,000 came to the Lord, right? And we see how rapidly the gospel spread to all nations, all races of people, of social class and everything. So this scattering is both the physical exile, but also the spiritual scattering when he gave them up. We see that read when Moses talks about it in Deuteronomy 32. He's bringing them back. And so this restoration is pictured as like a family homecoming. How many people keep showing up? They just keep coming. It's like, and you see them coming by boat, you're coming by plane, they just keep coming into the kingdom. And that was the excitement of the first century church, wasn't it? I mean, when you saw the numbers of people that were coming and growing in the kingdom. And so the Zion, God's people, his chosen, are going to turn from this weeping to this joy. Now, this nation bringing their wealth, see, this is where I can almost see some of them going, all right, we're going to fill our coffers. Kind of like Sheba, when she brought all that to Solomon, when people were bringing everything to David and paying tribute to him, and the coffers were getting full of money and the treasury was full. I could almost see them going, all right, they're all going to come and we're going to be the glorious nation of Israel, not like it was under, Hezekiah and David and so on. We're going to be even better than that as a nation. That never happened. So you have to ask your question. You have to ask the question. Did God fail? Is the prophecy wrong? Or does it mean something else? I think I'd take the second one than say God was wrong. Right? So it's not about, so when we read it, it makes it look like boats full of gold are showing up. And they're bringing, these nations are submitting to them. Now there's two, they call it Second Temple period views that the rabbinical teachers would have. Some would say that it was going to be that glorious influence that like a Solomon had, and that all the kings would give honor and tribute to this new national established kingdom. The other rabbinical teaching would be that they were all going to submit and convert. They were all going to become basically Hebrew, and they would yield in that. So there's a difference. One, they're going to become Jewish or Hebrew in a sense, and therefore submit as kings and nations. The other one was they're going to yield and give respect and pay tribute and rebuild. But both of those are not what is pictured. They didn't do any of that. Neither one of those two happened. So again, was Isaiah wrong, or is it something else? It's something else. Something that deals with that spiritual kingdom that he's talking about. And so I wanted to preface that as we come in now to verse 6. A multitude of camels shall cover you. Your young camels of Midian, Ephah, all those from Sheba shall come. They shall bring gold and frankincense. They shall bring good news, the praises of the Lord. All the flocks of Kedar shall be gathered to you. The rams of Naboth shall minister to you. They shall come up with acceptance on my altar. Now that's interesting. There's very precious things could only be accepted. Remember that? On his altar. God's very specific about what you could. But they're going to be accepted. And he said, and I will beautify my beautiful house. Those are these that fly like a cloud, like the doves to their windows. For the coastland shall hope for me, the ships of Tarshish first, to bring your children from afar, their silver and gold with them, for their name of the Lord your God, and for the Holy One of Israel, because he has made you beautiful. Can you see how they could look at that and think that either they're all going to become converts, or they're going to submit and just give us tribute, and we're going to become very wealthy and powerful? And again, historically, never happened. All the way up to 70 AD when the Romans finally burnt the place down, in 110 when Trajan finally just removed all the Jews off the land. This never happened. So it's not that. Because this is something more than just talking about the actual gold. This is looking at the resources and the things that are coming into this kingdom. Something that was spiritual that everybody was bringing. Look at the diversity of the different people who came. I mean, you had doctors, lawyers, you had Luke, you had Pharisees, you had all these different cultures and stuff that were coming in. And you're going to see how all of these wonderful things that were coming to this spiritual kingdom was going to add so much value to it. We are stronger than any time when it comes to the old kingdom of Israel, because they were one race, one people, one type, and they were very narrow focus on that. And that was a very physical type of relationship. But when you have a unique kingdom like we have today in Christ, in the Messianic kingdom, you have diversity of every nation, culture that comes together. And all of that diversity brings us more power and strength. I've said that about like the military. When you bring in, like in the National Guard, you got a bunch of old guys, older people that are part-time soldiers, and they're plumbers, lawyers, doctors, electricians, and they come in, and when they soldier, they bring some of the most amazing ideas, because they all come from different ways. And so they have a different perspective as well, as part of that reunited. So they not only bring these gifts, though, he says they're going to bring praise. The honor will come back. And so the Zion is beautiful because the Holy One, in other words, God is the one that is doing this. Remember, the action is God. God is, rising. God is the one taking action. The respondent is us bringing praise to him, bringing our talents and bringing our resources, bringing what we have and offering it in service to him. And then he brings up this idea, and this is again where they would have thought, foreigners are going to come and help us build our walls. Did they? Nah, go look at Nehemiah, right? Matter of fact, when the Samaritans tried to help, what did they tell them? You have no part of this, you half-breeds. You're not having a part of building this wall. So did they ignore Isaiah, or what happened? Or does it mean something else? You see what I mean? So, what do walls represent? That's the other thing. Walls were a sense of security. A city without a wall was not a city. It was a victim waiting. So, this is what he's going to talk about. That the foreigners are the ones that are going to build this kingdom. Foreigners shall build up your walls, and their kings shall minister to you. For in my wrath I struck you, but in my favor I have had mercy on you. Your gates shall be open continually, day and night. They shall not be shut, that people may bring to you the wealth of nations. Then their kings led in procession. For the nation and kingdoms that will not serve you shall perish. Those nations shall be utterly laid waste. So he's establishing this idea of both judgment and restoration at the same time. But God's wrath then gives way, he shows, to mercy. And so the city is going to rest on mercy, not on entitlement. That's what the Jews rested on. They had got to the point where they were resting on their entitlement, right? That somehow they were entitled, that they deserved it. And so this idea of the gates is something really awesome too, because one of the things that a city did was at sundown, you shut the gates because you had to protect the city. A city never left its gates open. So this would be something that if you were listening to it, you're building the walls, you just got the temple built, you say, we ain't leaving the gates open. Are you crazy? Remember the threats they had in trying to build the walls? When they were being attacked, while they were building the walls, what they had to do, they had to get guys who were guarding, while the other ones were building. And they built that wall fast because the enemies around them trying to stop them from building the walls around the city. And then have Isaiah say, the doors are going to be open all the time. It's a backwards picture. So what's he saying? It's open always. It also shows you something that you don't have to lock. Remember, you always hear this. I remember a day when we didn't lock our doors. Right? What did that tell you? When somebody says that, what does that say about society? We used to not have to lock our doors. Our doors are always open. Now, if you're in the middle of the night and you wake up, you go, did I check the door? And you go and check your door to make sure it's locked. That's what this is. You're not going to have to worry about locking your doors. You can leave them open. And all that want to come can come. That's fine. There's a source of security greater than what this world can comprehend. And these nations are going to be judged by their response to the Lord's reign. Now, I cannot look and find, every thread where a nation particularly rejected God and then God judged them and destroyed them. But if you look historically, when you look at nations that deviated away and started getting very corrupt and vile, God took them out. And he's allowing another one to come along. Many nations have started out and God's allowed them to come up. And when they start to grow and they become prosperous, and I bring this up and people get nervous, but early Nazis in Germany in 1920s, because of what happened in 1930s, the economy started turning around. The highways were being built, factories were being built, cars and stuff. It was a fantastic economy. And guess who led it? Adolf Hitler. But where'd he go with that? And by 1945, he's dead. I don't know. I'm assuming, but I mean, if we were to go through, we could probably look at places like this where you're not going to submit. Okay, you're out. And it's not on our timeline. It's not like, boy, he took a long time to get Stalin out. Look how long that guy lived, right? But he does it. That's kind of this idea. The Lord, if they don't respond, a sanctuary is a place that is set apart. And it's God that's going to be beautifying it. Lebanon has always. Now, today, when you say Lebanon, all I think of terrorists, right? I think of war and all kinds of horrible things. I have never, and I've even heard older political leaders and stuff talk about how gorgeous Lebanon was. I heard Trump a while back talking about how beautiful Lebanon used to be, a vacation spot, that people love to go there. It was beautiful and vibrant and thriving. What do you think of it now? Anytime you say Lebanon now, you just think of Hezbollah or some terrorist group and burned buildings and destruction. So that even me, when I'm reading it, I read this. But we got to remember that even then, Lebanon at this day and age was a representative of something very beautiful, splendor. And so as he starts out, he says, "The glory of Lebanon shall come to you. The cypress," because that's what they were known for. "The plane and the pine, to beautify the place of my sanctuary, and I will make the place of my feet glorious." Look what he says. My. "The sons of those who afflicted you shall come bending low to you. And all who despise you shall bow down at your feet. They shall call you the city of the Lord, the Zion of the Holy One of Israel." I also want to preface this that there is also an aspect of all of this that is still yet to come, that I have yet to see all the nations bow down, per se, as a spiritual. But we know in Revelation there will be that day. So there is even a shadow that is yet to be fulfilled completely, I think. And so making that glorious place is represented by these beautiful trees that are there. I don't know if they're still there. I never have. I guess I should look that up, see. But apparently that was something that was very valuable, very valuable. But the former enemies are going to have to acknowledge. They cannot deny it. That's one thing you can say about the Messianic kingdom in which we are a part of, is it's still around. No matter how many times that people have tried to kill and crush and destroy the Christians, it doesn't work. And that's exactly what prophet said? Daniel. Daniel said this last kingdom was going to be one that no one was ever going to be able to touch. This is that spiritual kingdom. And there are some leaders. We may not know specifically their hearts with God or not, but there are some national leaders in the past, probably around the world, that have acknowledged the one true God. I don't know. That's between him and them, but there does seem to be that relationship between them as well. And now, that forsaken city, once was abandoned and burned and everything, is now going to become something very majestic. "Whereas you have been forsaken and hated, with no one passing through, I will make you majestic forever, a joy from age to age. You shall suck the milk of nations, you shall nurse at the breast of the kings, and you shall know that I, the Lord, am your Savior and your Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. Instead of bronze, I will bring gold. Instead of iron, I will bring silver. Instead of wood, bronze. Instead of stones, iron. I will make you overseers peace and your taskmasters righteousness. Violence shall no more be heard in your land. Devastation or destruction within your borders. You shall call your walls, remember? Salvation. Your gates, talked about gates of praise. So God is going to take and turn what has been so forsaken. Now look at the state that Israel was in when Christ came. They were so corrupt spiritually. They were subjugated to the Romans. They were hated by everyone because they had this arrogance of believing in one God. And all the nations around them, they hated them because they believed in multiple gods. They were despised. They were looked down on. And so God is going to change that through this covenant relationship through Christianity. And so the Lord is known as the Savior. He is the Redeemer. You notice again, it's about Him. This is His words. This is what He does. You and I, we're not the ones. So this is something that is. And peace and righteousness are going to replace that oppression. Again, this is also a spiritual concept that no longer do we have to suffer through. And this violence and destruction no longer define the land. So how does that work? Well, is Christianity defined by our sovereign land somewhere that's being destroyed and invaded? You can't invade us, right? Where are you going to put your army? Where are you going to? Where? You know, it's like Rome tried. You know, they tried their best to wipe us out, but we were everywhere. Christians were everywhere. So no longer are we going to be defined by that. You can't come in and if you look, especially like a Jew reading this, man, they suffered that all the time. The Philistines taking cities from them and then fighting and getting them back, losing certain territory. I mean, they were almost defined by this ebb and flow of giving up and taking back in this struggle. And God said, no more. Because it's going to be a spiritual kingdom. What did Jesus say? My kingdom is not of this earth, right? And so this is kind of showing that as well. The Lord is going to become this everlasting light versus the sun and the natural light that is something that comes and goes. The sun shall be no more your light by day, nor for brightness shall the moon give you light. But the Lord will be your everlasting light, and your God will be your glory. Your sun shall no more go down, nor your moon withdraw itself, for the Lord will be your everlasting light, and your days of mourning shall be ended. Now, our sun hasn't gone away. We still have our moon, but it changes. Our light, we are dependent on different sources of light during the days. I mean, even during the year, we get more light during some of the year, less light. You know, if you even think about it, when we've had super volcanoes that have impacted the environment where it's blocked out sunlight, it can still be affected, and sun still goes down. It disappears, and then it comes back. We just assume it's going to, but then at night, what do we depend on? Starlight or moonlight. So there's always, but it's something that's created. So this is the contrast that, no, this light is coming from the Lord. This light is something that's going to be greater. And the blessing itself is the Lord Himself. And that's what is going to be greater. And the morning ends where God's everlasting light reigns. That's one of the key things. And that's kind of beautiful because, you know, when the morning ends and dawn, you know, we move on, it's going to take over. In other words, it's going to come over. So verses 22, now God is going to use these righteous people to display. We are His righteous people to display His glory to everyone. Your people shall all be righteous. They shall possess the land forever, the branch of my planting, the works of my hands, that I may be glorified. The last one shall become a clan, and the smallest one a mighty nation. I am the Lord. It is time. I will hasten it. So God's restored people are the works of His hands, something He's going to do. And the least are going to be the greatest. Isn't that what Jesus said? I did not come to be, served, but to serve. You want to be great in the kingdom? What did He say? Be the least. serve. It's an opposite of this ego and pride and self-accomplishment that, I can push everybody off the hill and be the top guy on the top, and everybody else now has to serve me. No. It's going to be not the same concept that's there. So when we wrap it up and we look at the lesson here, we see that how Isaiah is moving this darkness to glory. And this darkness, in the spiritual historical perspective, is our separation as humanity from God himself. And God is bringing this reconciliation. From those that are going to be in captivity, the darkness is sitting off in captivity away from their land, their place of worship with God. And he's going to bring them from this exile, this scattering, and gather them back. The same thing after this exile or disinheriting after Babel. Guess what he's doing? He's gathering them back. And then you see this morning to everlasting light that's going to be there. A lot. It's hard not to, you can almost break this down and dig deeper and deeper, but we can't. But it's also, I think, an exciting chapter. So if you're here with us this evening, we can help you in any way in your relationship with him. We always take this time. It sounds like, here we go again, but you know what? It's important for every time before we stop to kind of take an honest look at the way we've been living before God and take that action. If it needs, you turn and you stop and you pray to God right now while we're singing. But it's that important to us for everyone to have this moment to turn and think about how they've been living with God. And if you need the prayers of the church or any assistance at all, please let us know while we stand and sing.